What we expected as a fun night had turned into absolute terror when we went to see a nameless circus. I brought two of my siblings with me when I heard about it from a friend. It was a traveling group of entertainers that also brought carts and rides with them to open up a fair for a limited time. There were mascots of popular cartoon characters roaming about, and merry songs were blaring from stereos in every corner. Neon lights were illuminating the paths and the booths. There were a bunch of games to play and sideshows to see. It was quite a chaotic and noisy fair, but nothing looked out of the ordinary at first. Despite of the obvious copyright violations, it was actually quite enjoyable, but that was until we discovered the true nature of the crew. My 13-year-old sibling Jamie was overjoyed when he won a prize from one of the games. He was given a plastic toy and a free ticket to see the main event of the night. Few moments later, Ellie also won the ball toss. She was a 12-year-old girl who could hardly toss the ball far enough to reach the basket. They were usually built in a way which nobody could win, but a number of kids did so well in all of them as if they were practically giving away toys and the tickets for the show. This well-known hustle was still proven true when I tried to win a game myself and failed all of them countless times. I tried to buy a ticket instead, but they told me that they were all sold out. I needed one so I could accompany my siblings to see the show, and so I bought one off a kid who charged me an exorbitant price for it. Ironically, I still saw the booths giving them away for those who won the games, and it was then when I noticed something weird. A young boy was playing one of those dart games where you had to knock out some of the targets in order to win. It was clear that he couldn't throw them hard enough to reach the stand no matter how much he tried, but I saw the target falling down on its own even if the dart didn't graze it at all. It seemed that they were deliberately letting the kids win for some reason. My siblings were quite excited to see the main event, and they would have been mad at me if I stopped them from going. However, I deeply regretted not doing so when I already noticed some red flags. All the entertainers and the mascots were hyping the kids up for the show, and it was very effective. They described it to them as magical, unbelievable, and unforgettable. They said it was a show that they would only see once in their lifetime, and they were not wrong about it. It was magical just as it was inexplicable. It was indeed unbelievable just as it was terrifying. No single soul would ever forget the show because they would be deeply traumatized by it. The event was to occur inside a tent that was no bigger than a small hut. I was confused how such a small space would hold a large crowd and a grand show, and it was even more perplexing when I went inside. There was no explanation to how it was physically possible, but the space inside the small tent was significantly bigger than what it looked like from the outside. There were seats surrounding the big stage that could hold at least 100 people. I thought perhaps a very deceiving illusion was in play. I assumed we were surrounded by mirrors as I looked around the big space, but then the crowd began to fill the seats at the back and up to the front. There were just a handful of grown-ups like me who managed to snag a ticket for the show, while there were at least 30 kids ranging from 9 to 15 who were too excited for it to start. The crew in mascot costumes surrounded us in every corner, and they all just glared at the front without moving an inch. I sat right next to my siblings, and as the show began, I was bewildered by what was happening. The opening act were two fire dancers wearing masks. They were tossing and juggling balls of flames with barely any clothes to prevent themselves from getting burnt. But what astounded me the most was I couldn't see how they were producing the fire. It was simply coming out of their hands, and they were molding the flames into a ball like clay. The next act was both baffling and alarming. One of the mascots escorted two grown-ups from the crowd, and they were practically forced to participate in the show. They were both placed inside a glass box that were then covered with a black cloth. Along with the children, the performer counted to 5 and removed the cloth from the boxes. They all applauded when he revealed that the volunteers had disappeared, and they just casually moved the show along without bringing them back. The other grown-ups in the crowd looked at each other and wondered where the two individuals went, and I was just as clueless as they were. And on the following act, everything went from baffling to extremely horrifying. Smoke filled the tent as the next performer entered the stage with a bang. Fireworks went off along with the playing of drums and trumpets when the magician came to the scene. He was wearing a red suit and a tall hat with a wide smile on his face, and I already sensed that there was something strange about him. The children excitedly waited for what he was about to do. and they all applauded when he threw a handful of confetti into the air that turned into butterflies. I was scratching my eyes repeatedly out of disbelief. I could usually notice a hint of the trick when I see one, but I couldn't figure out how these people were doing all of these things since the beginning. The magician removed his tall hat and acted as if he was about to pull out something from it, and it was then when the applauses were turned into screams. He made a hand gesture over his hat like any other magician, but what he took out from it was neither a rabbit nor a dove. With a seemingly harmless smile on his face, he reached inside his hat elbow deep at the same time when we heard one of the remaining grown-ups scream. He pulled out his arm from his hat as it disappeared from the person's body like it was literally being teleported to the stage. The magician pushed it back into his hat, and the man's arm was returned to him. Needless to say, every single person in the crowd was in awe. We were freaked out just as much as we were incredibly amazed, but the worst was yet to unfold. The magician reached inside his hat once again, and he made the children guess what he was about to pull out from it. All of a sudden, the other grown-up seated on the opposite side held onto her belly as if she was about to puke. The kids counted to 3, and blood gushed out from the hat as the magician pulled out the woman's guts from it while she rolled on the floor and coiled in pain. Screams enveloped the area as the rest of us realized the horror right before our eyes. The children began to cry. Including myself, only 3 grown-ups remained in the crowd. One of them rushed to the exit, but he was blocked by a mascot who effortlessly lifted him off the floor and tossed him away several meters across the room. The other mascot on the other end smashed his head under his foot. I immediately grabbed my siblings and we tried to squeeze our way across the crowd who were all shouting for help at the top of their lungs. At the time, the magician kept on pulling a kid out of his hat and putting them inside a sack. One of the mascots also tried to block our way, but we swiftly changed our direction in order to avoid him. I wanted to get out of that hellhole along with my siblings as fast as I could, but my conscience did not allow me to leave the other kids behind. The circus and all of its crew were no ordinary people, and they were using inexplicable tricks to lure in the children and kidnap them in the end. Grown-ups like me who managed to get inside the tent were in their way, and so they tried to get rid of us one after the other. There were only 2 of us remaining along with the children who were already beyond terrified, and so we tried to help each other in order to get everybody out. The other adult was Raymond, and he was there to see the show with his younger sister. Instead of running for the exit, we lunged towards the magician to stop him from bagging the kids. We pinned him down to the ground while his sister and my siblings freed the other children from the sacks. Raymond aggressively threw heavy punches until the magician was knocked out cold. When the other crew realized what we were trying to do, they all ran towards the stage to stop us. As a result, the exit was left unguarded, and some of the kids were able to escape. The mascots were big and inhumanly strong, but their headdresses had limited their line of sight. We took the magician's hat and ran towards their blind spots until we were able to get past them. The fire dancers also joined the fray, but Raymond took action immediately and smashed one of the chairs on their head. I never attacked a person before, but I had no choice but to follow his lead since the lives of our siblings were at stake. Even though we managed to draw in most of the crew on the stage in order to give way for the other children to escape, there was still a lot of us left inside the tent. I tried to reach inside the magician's hat just to see what I might get inside it, and I was surprised by what I got. Apparently, I could pull out anything from whatever I was looking at while I reached inside it. I didn't even bother to understand how it worked. I just looked at the chest of the mascot blocking our way and pulled his heart out from inside the hat, which instantly killed him. I told Raymond about what I just discovered, and we took turns to take out all of the crew within our line of sight as fast as we could. Blood splattered all over as we took out their innards from inside the hat. However, it was then when the ringmaster had decided to reveal himself. Along with our siblings, the rest of the kids fled from the tent. We thought that it was over. But then, this tall, old man with an imposing presence stepped out from the backstage and looked at us with a piercing glare. With just a wave of his hand, he was able to snatch the magician's tall hat from us without even moving from where he stood. Whatever these strange abilities they had which made it possible for them to do impossible things, his was on a different level. He just wiggled a couple of his fingers and the entire tent began to collapse. We ran for our lives as the ground was shaking, and we barely made it out before the tent completely imploded and disappeared. We reported everything that happened to the authorities, including the gory casualties, but I couldn't blame them for not believing everything we said. We returned to the area soon after, but the traveling circus was no longer there.